Again, once again, welcome to Zoom at noon. We have some really wonderful guests. Both have been on my show, and both of the companies are just outstanding family businesses. Today, we're going to talk about a subject that is often overlooked, and really talk about the challenges of loss and how do you plan for it and how do you deal with it. Not only just financially, but emotionally, and the impact of the business. So it's a very important show, and it's a subject that we don't want to talk about that much, but it's very important. So why don't I go around the horn, and Dennis, I'll start with you. If you just kind of introduce yourself and your company.
Sure. My name is Dennis Mikula. I'm the president of Mikula Contracting. We've been an excavating and demolition contractor since 1946, so we're in our 76th year. And we're named the 2020 New Jersey Family Business of the Year.
And we're so honored to give you that trophy. It's just well deserved, very well deserved. And so, Kate and George, you want to say a little bit about your firm and yourselves?
Sure, I'll kick it off. So we formed the Reilly Financial Group in 1992. So this is our 30th year. And we are a holistic financial planning organization. We work a lot with closely held businesses and do a lot of business planning, help them or assist in estate planning, and a lot of retirement planning. And we love what we do. And Kate is a very important part of the team, because in working with family businesses, there are family members that have gray hair like me, and then there are family members that are more Kate's generation that she works with quite a bit. So I'll let her talk about that.
And George, I mentioned to Kate the last time I saw you two, I was asked to be a pastor in August of Covenant United Methodist Church. So quarter time. I'm still obviously full time at Rothman Institute, but in doing that, I've thought a lot about death, because I've led 3 funerals. The first was a woman who was 106 years old, so that was a real celebration. That's a life we wish we all could have. But the other 2, one was a 29-year-old who died of asthma, and another a 23-year-old who was on the basketball court. But and so you really have got to think about this. You just never know. You just never absolutely know. And I was saying I had to take a red eye back, and I've had this a chest cold, and I had no energy or anything, and to go from 100% to you just never know. So it's important to have this conversation. So Dennis has been very open and honest. I had an opportunity to meet Dennis's dad, amazing guy, at our Family Business of the Year Awards in October at the Glen Ridge Country Club, and looked incredibly healthy, handsome man. So Dennis, so share your story.
So this, right immediately after Thanksgiving this year, a couple days after Thanksgiving, my father was a little bit under the weather. Nothing he haven't seen before, kind of like Dale's just talking, kind of just wasn't himself. So he took a little time off. He was home, and a little time after that, he ended up checking into the hospital. He had some breathing issues, and it was found out he ended up having COVID pneumonia. 3 days after my father checked in to the hospital in early December, my mother also checked into the hospital, same thing with breathing, and went in. A week to the day that my father's checked into the hospital, he passed away on December 14th. In the same hospital room as my mother, because they were both in at the same time. 30 days after his passing, my mother also passed from the same thing. So it's been a lot, as anyone could imagine, what our family is dealing with, outside of, the business, plus just emotionally, or more so emotionally with our family and everybody, because it happened so quick. And like Dale said, there was no indications of anything. Last holiday we had together, everybody, laughing, drinking, enjoying family time. You never think it's going to be your last. You never think. I worked with my father every day in the office. We saw each other 7 days a week. We saw each other when we weren't in the office. So having something like that happen so sudden was unexpected for all. It wasn't like it was a long-term illness. It happened that quick. And the same thing, like I said, after my mother, again, 30 days to the day he passed away, she passed away. So So going through what Dale was saying, and it's talking about, you never know when the last opportunity is going to be there. To have a conversation, to tell somebody you love them, and I'm very fortunate I did both of those. And but we're dealing, with a lot. Obviously, and we're going to talk about today the transition, with the business from a second to a third generation, dealing, again, the aftermath with losing of two family members, again, our parents, but some people, my father and mother being involved in the community, my father, throughout the state with his business connections and everything is a lot to, it's a lot to take in, and I'm still, I haven't grieved yet, because it's been every day, just, putting one foot in front of the other and continuing to, take care of as many people as I can, from a family perspective and then a business perspective.
Well, Dennis, I just thank you for being so open about this. And I know you said the other day how it wasn't just losing a dad, you were losing a best friend. And so you were that close with your dad. Yeah. And so it's and now George and Kate, so you deal with people who deal, I mean, you're like ministers in a way, you're financial ministers, where you deal with people who are dealing with this loss or the potential loss. So talk a little bit about your work and what you've done.
Sure. So I always joke, particularly because I was a psychology major, that we're financial therapists. And first and foremost, Dennis, thank you so much for your vulnerability and for sharing your story. And it really speaks to what we do with the Reilly Financial Group. So we really focus in on estate planning, and part of any good estate plan is having life insurance in place so that that everyone's going to be taken care of. And we always say on our team, Noah built the ark on a sunny day. So we really encourage family businesses, but also just families in general, to have those hard conversations early and often when everyone's young and healthy. And so that the business owner in particular can speak to how they want things to get passed down and how they want things to continue after they pass, so that you have it all in writing, but then you also have the life insurance in place. And George can speak even more to this. You have the proper life insurance in place so that you don't get surprised with new business partners you never really wanted to have when this sort of thing happens.
Yeah, it's so important, but it's the conversation no one wants to have. So we do consider ourselves, ministers and talking about it, because you have to get it out. And I can share with you so many different stories. I'll give you two real quick ones where, we had a business owner, partner in a law firm, and unfortunately passed away early. But prior to that, we had put together a buy-sell agreement. And as a result, that partner's family was properly taken care of. The surviving partner was able to take over the business, and things ran smoothly. Obviously, it was an emotional wreck, but from a financial standpoint, they did the planning. And like Kate said, they did it while everyone was healthy on a sunny day. So it's something we never expect to happen. And Dennis is, living proof of that. But yet the fact that you have these hard conversations, it's important. Another one was a gentleman who became disabled, which is something I think we don't think enough about either. Clearly we talk about if somebody passes away, what happens, but what we don't talk enough about is what if somebody gets disabled and can't work any longer. And the number one reason why small businesses have gone out of business is the disability of one of the key partners. And so we also talk a lot about what happens after that. So, you plan, and just hope it doesn't happen.
Yeah, and at some point we want to talk a little more about the buy-sell agreements and some of the financial instruments in place. But Dennis, your dad was the CEO, and there was a pretty clear line of succession. You guys had talked about that before, or how that transition's been pretty smooth.
It's been pretty smooth, and it's because we've had the difficult conversations. I'll share a quick story. About 6 or 7 months ago, I went into his office, And I sat down, I said, Dad, you know what the problem is? And he looked at me back straight up and he says, I know you're going to tell me what the problem is, because we had that type of relationship. I said, I'm 44, you're 66. I said, the issue is they're going to be throwing us a retirement party on the same day, because he was going to work well into his 80s. And I said, I wasn't going to start taking over a business into my 60s, because we don't have that large of an age gap, because my parents are high school sweethearts. I got married right out of high school, and had myself and my brother pretty quick. So we were always talking about, it wasn't so much, I wasn't worried about the succession, from second to third generation. I was, kind of looking fourth generation, and we talked to him. He's like, I'm not going to work into my 80s. And let me tell you, if he was alive today, he'd be working into his 80s. And there's nothing more I'd want than that, because of the relationship we had. But we've had those difficult discussions. We talked about it through the years. I'm very fortunate, because working alongside him, there were no secrets. There were no secrets with the succession planning. There were no secrets as far as, banking, insurance. You think of all the different things that, what you're personally signing for, what's all that stuff. Everything was laid out. I could only imagine. I've had a lot of conversations since with business owners that have a son and or daughter in the business, that the second generation underneath the founders don't have an idea where everything sits. And I think that's the most, again, talking about succession plan, right? And George was talking before about, are there going to be partners involved? Are you going to be a partner with somebody? Is it just coming down just to you? There's a lot of discussions that need to be held. They are not the easiest discussions, but for the sake of the organization continuing on, they're the most important conversations that anyone can have.
And essential. And there are new aspects of it now. Again, my mom, who's over here now, is 87, and she has Alzheimer's. And so luckily my dad passed away quickly in 2020, and luckily I was on the bank account. Had I not been, it would have been a nightmare. So Alzheimer's is this thing, because we're living longer, George and Kate, so you have a business partner who's still alive, but their capacity is not what it was. Have you dealt with that? Are there any stories of that being an issue? Because I can see that being very, very touchy.
Yes. And not necessarily from a partnership perspective, but certainly from a key employee perspective.
Right.
And that's why when you do your documents with your estate attorney, you want to make sure you have power of attorney. And this goes for people that even are just employees of an organization. You don't have to own a business to do this. It's so important that spouses, children of parents that perhaps maybe one of the spouses have passed away have power of attorney. And in your situation, Dale, for your mom, if you were listed as the power of attorney, prior to your dad passing, you can now step in and act on her behalf with bank accounts, investments, IRAs, et cetera. Without that, even amongst spouses, there is a very, very difficult process you have to go through in order to access those accounts. So, but regarding the dementia, the Alzheimer's, this is where also long-term care, we have that discussion. And it's really one of the only insurances that a company most of the time can deduct the premium. Life insurance, disability insurance is difficult, and you may not want to deduct it. And you'll talk to your accountant about that. But long-term care, and this is the government encouraging, the business world to take care of their key employees, and all of their employees if they want. We've done these voluntary long-term care plans for companies, and now the business can do a nice thing by protecting that person's future health and also be able to deduct it.
Wow, that's what I mean. I learned, luckily we had a power of attorney, but I learned that is so important. That in some ways the most important thing, because now having power of attorney, there's so many things I can do that you can't. And so, wow, that's very, very powerful. Kate, let me ask you, then we'll go back to Dennis. So you're young, and young people say, well, I'm going to live forever. I don't need to worry about the stuff. I don't need to invest for retirement. I don't need insurance. how do we break that cycle? Because that's the time you need to start doing some of these things.
So as far as in our practice, I reach out to all of the children of the clients of the more senior partners on our team. So we try to be really proactive. I'm also really vocal amongst my friends and peers about investing early and investing often and taking advantage of things like 401k matches. And I think it's just being a bit assertive with the conversations where a young person might say, you know what, insurance, isn't that for when I'm married with kids, or isn't that only if I own a business? And people make that mistake all the time. And I have to just remind them, well, we are all going to die at some point. But more importantly, I explain to them that buying insurance when you're young is the best decision you can make because it's going to be so much less expensive the earlier and the healthier you buy it. I also explain to people when it comes to life insurance, particularly if it's cash value life insurance, I explain to them, you're not just buying this for the death benefit, you're buying this, and I always use one of our partners as an example, who super healthy gentleman, but has diabetes, and therefore life insurance super expensive for him. So I explain to people, you're locking in your insurability today in your 20s or 30s. So that is something were to come up in your health later on that does not affect your day-to-day living at all. You're still living a totally normal and healthy life, but it makes life insurance really expensive. So I explain it from that perspective too. It's a little less morbid.
So Kevin Curran, who's a regular on the show, brings up an important point to remind the listeners that a power of attorney extinguishes on the death of the signatory, which means that wills and power, we talk a lot about wills, and that's why, everybody should have a will unless your partner, the state becomes your partner when you don't do that. But the power of attorney is so vitally important. Dennis, you can say something.
No, I'm saying we went through the same thing. So I had the medical power of attorney and power of attorney while they were both going through everything.
Right.
And then again, that extinguished, and then we had to, get again with named executor and going through everything. So it was absolutely, that's a great point right there. You don't realize as you're going through how many things change as you're dealing with every single aspect, while, decisions can't be made while they were in the hospital. And then, it changes upon death, and then so again, staying current with everything was very important during this time period for us, just to keep everything moving along.
And so, I mean, luckily your company did it your dad and mom did it the right way.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go back to the buy-sell agreement. So George, you talked about that. So you have what is a buy-sell agreement? People talk about that, but I don't know that everybody really understands what that is.
It's a great question. Yeah. So in its purest form, the buy-sell agreement, let's use a simple example where you have two partners, and let's say they're unrelated. And let's say you have a business that's worth $1 million. So each partner owns $500,000. What the buy-sell agreement states is that whoever passes on first, their estate agrees to sell their shares in the corporation, and the surviving partner agrees to buy those shares from the estate. Let's say it's a spouse, right? And the question that I talk to a lot of our clients about is, as much as you get along with your partner's spouse, would you want to name her or him as your partner one day? And they say, well, not really.
Right.
And my answer to them is, without a buy-sell agreement, that's essentially what you're doing. Because if you have a partner, your partner's will states that everything's going to go to their spouse or to their estate. Let's say it's a spouse. If it goes to the spouse, now the spouse knocks on the door and says, hey, where's my desk? I own half of this business.
Right.
And again, as much as we love, I have partners and I love their spouses, but I don't think I want to be in business with them the same way I don't think my partners would want to be in business with my wife.
Mm-hmm.
So the way you do that is you set up a buy-sell agreement so that there's no ifs, ands, or buts that spouse is going to sell the shares. Now, step one, often though, people do a buy-sell agreement, but they don't do step two, and that's funding it, right?
Mm-hmm.
You might set up a buy-sell agreement, and I've asked many clients this question and like, yeah, I've got that operating, yeah, I got all that. And I always say, is it funded? They said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, do you have life insurance in force to be able to buy out your partner or spouse? Because if you don't have a lump sum of tax-free money to do it with, you're going to be forced to be paying out your partner or spouse over many years for that portion of the business. So that's why, if insurable, it's the least expensive route to go. If someone's uninsurable, then you do what's called a structured settlement over the course of years, but you add interest to that and it gets expensive.
Well, that's because again, everybody talks about buy-sell agreements, but to fund it is so talking about succession, Dennis, so it was pretty clear the succession, was that written in the will or the paper? How was it that you became CEO, and how did they structure that?
I mean, yes, everything was determined, everything was written down, everything was discussed. There's, a clear picture that was painted. It was going to go from my father to me, after, either step down or, upon a tragedy like this. So, we discussed it as a family, we discussed it, it was written down, it's a legal, situation, because you're dealing with, the corporation, you're dealing with stocks, you're dealing with everything, and you're dealing with the will situation is, again, where everything was going. But those conversations were held, during the sunny day, as everybody would say. We talked about the succession of the business, where we wanted to go, going from the second to third generation. We had the difficult conversations. What happens if something would happen? What happens if something would happen to me? Because I was handling things in our business that my father wasn't handling, whether it was behind the scenes with the financing, banking, insurance, and everything. So those are the conversations that needed to be had at an earlier time, because having them now would have been too late. And that's the message I get out to either business owners that were in the second generation talking to the first, or like mine's third, talking to have the conversation. It doesn't always come, my father thinks, he would have worked into his 80s and knows. So, he's felt that sense of, and I understand that, but the conversations that we generated over a lunch, over a dinner, over a drink, or, okay, what happens if something happens? What happens if something happened to the both of us? There are a lot of times we were in a car together. We were driving to look at, meeting somebody, going to an event like yours, Dale. What happens after that? No one wants to talk about those conversations, but that's reality. That could have happened. This is what happened. But, what happens if something happens to the second and the third generation? Now who's in charge? So there's a lot of, when you sit down and you talk with an attorney, and you sit down and you talk with a financial planner, there's a lot of directions. It doesn't always go, from your parents to your son. It could be a parents and the son, or parents and the daughter that something happens to. George told me, disability. What happens if, I'm handling the banking, something happens to me? Now I can't make those, somebody has to step into my shoes at that point to handle that. So there's a lot of discussions to be had. They need to be had. And that's hopefully, if somebody gets something out of it today, I think that's the most valuable thing somebody could take away. You have to have the difficult conversations.
Yeah, and it's funny. I used to, kind of tongue in cheek, you'd see these senior executives from major companies, and they wouldn't go in the same elevator, or they wouldn't take the same plane. And you said, oh, it's kind of funny, but it's a real, especially a publicly traded company, there are billions of dollars at risk with something like that. So Kate, I want to go back to you. So let's get it, because I want to move this and make sure we cover everybody. So you're in your 20s or something. Whole life used to be not what it is today. Is that what should someone be investing in, when you're young, to prepare for the future?
Absolutely. Great question. So whole life is not for everybody, and it's really depends on everyone's separate specific situation. So when you are young, and say you just got married, or you just got a promotion, or you just bought a property, the best thing to protect you, as far as the most efficient way to do it, would be term life insurance, because it's going to be much less expensive, and you are getting the largest death benefit for the smallest amount of monthly or annual premium. You choose which way you want to go as far as the premium goes. Now, if you are in a position, it's sort of one of those cherry on the top of the ice cream sundae of financial planning. So if someone's coming to you and promoting that first and foremost, you probably want to look elsewhere as far as financial planners go. because you want to look at everything holistically, and you want to first have your 6 months of expenses put away in savings. So that's your emergency savings. Next, you want to be maxing out all of your retirement funds. So if your employer has a 401k, you want to be maxing that out and doing the full 19,500 a year. Or at the very least, getting enough to get the match from your employer if they have a match in place. If you are under a certain income level and are still eligible to contribute to a Roth IRA, you want to do that as well. You want to do some after-tax investing. And if you're doing all of that and you're in a really good position, then another nice sort of tool to have in your tool belt is whole life insurance, because it grows on a guaranteed basis and it builds a cash value that you can take money out of on a tax-free basis, as long as you can get what you put into it out first. So as far as whole life goes, I would say it's a great tool to use, particularly long-term wise. So it's not something that you want to use to then take money out 3 years later to put a down payment on a house.
Right.
It's something that you might want to start in your 20s and 30s when you have the extra cash on the sidelines, and then use it as a retirement supplement in your 60s and 70s, or use it as a really nice legacy play. So in your 70s and 80s, start taking cash value loans or cash value withdrawals to fund things for your grandkids.
Great. Well, that's a great plan that every person under 40 should really be thinking about. Chris Coates, who's a friend of the show, who's been on the show, brings up a very, very good point that the valuation of your business is essential. I've often said you've got to have it multiple. I don't know, George, you want to say, how often do you think people should have their business valued?
So usually every 2 to 3 years is when we recommend it. And a lot of accounting offices have become sophisticated and they actually have a valuation person. So if you're working with an accountant or a CPA firm, they may have one. There's also exclusive companies that do just that, right? And that is crucial, because if you're valuing the business, not just for buy-sell purposes, but also for estate tax planning, 3 years from now, it might have a completely different value. So if we go back to our two friends that had $500,000 of insurance on each other, well, in 3 years, if the business is worth $1.5 million or $2 million, you probably need some more insurance.
Yeah, that's it amazes me too at how few companies really focus on the valuation of the business, because in a lot of ways that's everything, and I obviously we work with a lot of different family businesses, and a lot of times there's conflict in the family, and the businesses have had record years. For whatever reason, they've had record years. Now's the time to have it valued and really think about whether you want to sell it or not. And so I've really encouraged that, but there's a reluctance. Dennis, did you have the business valued?
We're in the process of that again. We had it a couple of years ago, like everybody was just talking about. But again, anytime with the, we're dealing with the estate right now, we're dealing with the transfer, of stocks and everything. So everything has to be evaluated at this point. Again, upon the death of, any of the stockholders. So we're right in the middle of that right now. So again, but, through the years we've had it valued. So we had an idea, where everything, again, our industry changes time to time, but again, to have an idea where it is helps, and whether it's a closely held family business where there's only a couple partners, or like you were saying before, again, talking to other business owners where it's, not just the father, son, or grandfather, father, son succession. Sometimes there's cousins, right? And sometimes, and then the cousins' kids, and it starts branching off in multiple directions. And like you said, there's a lot that goes into that. So, I advise that for every business to have that before, again, we have to know, right? I'm in a situation with the estate, and everything. So we have to have it done, but to have it done before is very, very valuable.
Yeah, that's, I'm just amazed that more businesses don't, because as I said, at the end of the day, that's everything. So Dennis, let's talk about the emotional side. I mean, do you have any advice, given going I mean, obviously some people who have a pastor or a priest or a rabbi or something, that can be, some people use counselors.
Mhm.
Knowing what you know now, what kind of support system do you think is important?
I think having a strong family around you is amazing. I'm very blessed. My wife and daughter are my rocks, at home. When I leave the family business, whatever time that is at night, I go home, and that's my support system. I'm very fortunate. My younger brother works with us. My father's older brother works with us. My mother's uncle has been with us, as far as family business. So we have the support at home. I have friends that I reach out to. So there's a lot of different support runs deep. It's not only just, your family, it's your closest friends, it's your advisors, it's people inside your industry, it's people outside your industry. And I think, there's, again, the spiritual support, there's a million different ways. My advice is, I think everybody is kind of like, I know I haven't properly grieved yet. I know when my father passed away, my concern went to my mother's health and getting her out of the hospital for those next 30 days. After she passed away, is taking care of the family and making sure everything with the business is running. I haven't had a chance yet. It's April right now, and they passed away in December and January, to sit back and actually fully feel the true emotion of what happened. I'm being honest. I have moments every day is a reminder. I walk through my father's office. I stop at the house every day and get their mail and doing that. So every day is a constant reminder. But I think everybody is on their own time. Reach out. Don't be afraid to, if it's in your organization, say, hey, listen, I need help with this right now. My schedule was completely full before this happened. Now you have a different situation. So I think reaching out and saying, I need help is important. Reaching out to family members and just having conversations. And I think there's so many different ways that people want to help. Sometimes they don't know how to. And you have to understand that from my perspective too. I think there's still employees that don't know what to say to me. There's family members that don't know what to say to each other, because it was so quick and so sudden. Right. That I think, you take it all in and you try and just process through everything, which I am still, I'd say struggling with every day of what happened. But you get up in the morning, and you put one foot in front of the other, and you keep, my goal is to make them proud. So that's what drives me every single day.
And it may be too early to talk about legacy, but George and Kate, have you worked with families that want to donate something to a school or name something after them or those types of things? Have you done that? Is there a process that someone can go through to do that?
Most definitely, yeah. So when we're working with business owners on their estate plan, the topic of charity always comes up. Mm-hmm. Right? And a lot of times, if a company has been successful many times, they're very thankful. And most successful business owners have an attitude of gratitude, we call it, right? So they feel like they've been blessed. They want to give back, whether it's to the church or the synagogue or to a really good cause, whether it be cancer or St. Jude's or things of that nature. Mm-hmm. So quite often in discussing this with their attorney, they'll have a section within their will or within their estate plan that does go to charity. There are also companies, and this is where it really gets fun, that have been extremely successful, whereby they'll set up a separate foundation, and you can do that, with your family members. And there are many successful businesses that say, hey, I love you, I love my kids, I love my grandkids, but I'm going to teach you the lesson of giving back. So I'm going to give you something outright. You're going to get the business, but sometimes mom and dad's assets aren't going to go directly to you. They're going to go into this foundation, and we want you to run it. And you to be the ones to make sure that the money gets dispersed properly. We have a client that was very interested, and their passion was education. They feel like if you have a college education, you're set for life. So what they did with their assets is the money's going to go into this foundation to provide scholarships for kids that can't afford to go to college to make sure that they go to college. It's a specific high school in New Jersey where they're going to be handing out scholarships once a year, which is a really cool gesture, right?
Yeah.
And what's nice for the parents is they get to think about it now, right?
Right.
To wait till they're gone. They can almost see what's happening. And they do it with current assets as well. But a lot of times in the plan, there's definitely room for charity.
And it can be really in-depth and really complicated and require lots of pre-planning, but it can also be as simple as naming a charity or naming an alma mater as your beneficiary on your current accounts. And just sort of as a quick plug, we always remind everyone that who the beneficiary is on something comes first before your will. So even if you've updated your will and said, I want all of my assets to go to this person and all of these other assets to go to this charity, if you still have a beneficiary written on an IRA that is someone else, they're going to go by that first. So we always remind everyone to make sure all your beneficiaries are up to date. But as far as giving back, it can be as simple as that. So we have plenty of clients who say, you know what, either they don't have kids or they say, you know what, I've taken care of my kids and I want to leave all of this to my favorite charity of choice or my alma mater.
Yeah, before my, when my father passed away and my mother, there's every indication she was going to be okay. She called me from the hospital and asked to start a scholarship in my father's name at my daughter's school. And then after she passed away, we, obviously added her name to the scholarship to help kids that don't have the opportunity, to afford the school to have that same opportunity. They were very big into giving back. And that's something that, my wife and I are undertaking now and starting a family foundation that will be funded every year in their honor, to help kids that need it, because that's how they were. So, although we were going to do that, although they didn't have it spelled out, that's something that's important to us. I know it's important to them. So we're going to kind of be the gatekeepers on that moving forward and establishing a foundation. But I could see the benefits if it was, laid out before, and it kind of answers questions, but we're going to follow their wishes.
Well, that's wonderful, because I know how, how generous they were and how committed they were to helping other people. And Dennis, I've gotten to know you and you're the same, very, very much the same way about helping folks and really, really reaching out to folks who are struggling. So as we look at this issue, this very, very touchy issue, there are a lot of real basic things that everybody can do. And it doesn't have to be thought of in such a negative way. So from a healthcare standpoint, from a health standpoint, I think one of the things that I learned is about the long-term care. And so having my mom live with me now, and I realize this long-term care, because people are living longer, is more important than it ever has been. And so a business can do that. So for example, for me, I have a consulting firm. I could actually get a long-term care contract through the firm that would cover me rather than just having to pay out myself. Is that correct, George?
That's correct. Yeah. And
wow,
depending upon how you're set up, whether if it's a C Corp, it's fully deductible. If it's an S Corp, there's an allowance you have to deduct based on your age, which you can talk to your accountant about, but absolutely.
What about an LLC? Is that like a C?
Yeah. You can still, it would fall under the same as S Corp, where you'll get an allowance. Like in your 50s, it's let's say $1,500. I'm making it up. In your 60s, right, it's $3,000. So you can deduct a portion of that premium based on your age.
See that's bigger than I think people realize. And again, I haven't gone through it with my mom and my dad. My dad was taking care of my mom, and he passed away. And my mom was in rehab. She had some problems and was in rehab. And my aunt was, she died in the long-term care facilities. And you start to look and you realize that home health care, that if you can afford home health care, have someone come in and take care, that really is the best option. But it's expensive. And the long-term care program is really very expensive. And if you have your own company, and more people are entrepreneurs, that you can really cover that. That really is very, very powerful, because that's a great investment of your dollars.
It sure is. And the common misnomer that people have is like, they say, well, I'm going to have Medicare and a Medicare supplement. Doesn't that cover long-term care? And the answer is, it does for a little while, but certainly not forever, right? Medicare gives you some allowance, but after 100 days, you're pretty much on your own to pay for that. And many, many people aren't aware of that.
Yeah, and we're living every day. I was just telling you. So, Medicaid you get full, but Medicare, my mom's on hospice. Medicare, she gets an hour a day, 5 days a week. That's it.
Yeah, yeah.
That's it. So I'm paying for other stuff, and so to put that burden on other people, it's really, really important. Kate, you were going to say something?
I was going to just add that, not to mention, because of where we live, long-term care is always expensive, but the tri-state area, it's even more expensive. So it's definitely something, particularly if you are a just employee, but also particularly if you're a family business owner in New Jersey, it's something you want to plan ahead for, because it's going to be a big cost in the future. And I think the other thing that I wanted to add that people don't know is that a long-term care policy can actually pay a family member to take care of a loved one. They just have to get the proper certification. So if they get a proper certification to be a home health aide, the long-term care policy that, say, mom or dad had, can pay the son or daughter or niece or nephew to take care of them. So that's really helpful.
Really? Oh, that's interesting. I know some states are doing that. They don't pay people. I know New York is doing that. I don't know if New Jersey is doing that yet. So Dennis, as your business is continuing on, did you and your dad have some strategic plans that you're implementing now with the business, or how is the business going to change under your leadership? Or
the best advice I had from a couple of people that have went through similar situations is we didn't make any wholesale changes. We've been around this, January was 76 years in business. I'm not coming in to make, a bunch of radical decisions. Now there's always, from generation 1 to 2, 2 to 3, that everybody puts their mark on it. But, the first thing we did, once we settled, and I'm still trying to get both feet on the ground, but, I had got the entire organization together. We took a day, we talked about, we talked about the vision. I talked about my vision of the company and continuing it on. I talked about, the type of, benefits that, we're looking into. We'll continue, we're going to continue to do what we're doing, but just like every day when we were together, how can we be more effective? How can we be more efficient? How can we, continue to offer great things to our employees to continue on? I mean, again, we're very fortunate, and Dale, to win the family business year in 2020. I'm not going to step in 2022 and make a lot of wholesale changes. We want to continue. My grandfather's the biggest thing that we carry on from when he started, and I was very fortunate to get, to have been around when I was a kid, was his work ethic. I mean, that is what's carrying us. The integrity from my grandfather to my father, passed on to the third generation, is something that, we're continuing on, and that'll never change. Technology will change, right? And in different ways you do things, but the work ethic, what was started, 76 years ago, something that I take a lot of pride in myself. Are there going to be changes? Absolutely. I think if, my father was still with us, there, as Dale, you and I, we've talked about making changes. If he, as he was saying, hopefully slowing down, going into retirement, there are going to be things change. There has to be changes to stay with the times. But I think if you're true to your core and true to your values and your foundation, my job is to keep the ship going and find out ways to improve it at this point.
Well, yeah, Dennis, it's so admirable what you guys have done, and so see, Kate, you're too young to remember, but I've talked to, and my aunt, there was a time when women couldn't open bank accounts. There was a time my mom and my uncle actually owned one of the most profitable Shell stations in California, right by Pebble Beach. And when he passed, Shell tried to take the company from her, and she ended up suing him for $5 million. And so fortunately, we've moved on from that standpoint, but it's just that history is important to remember. So as we begin to think about but that really points out the fact that you've got to make sure that there's more than one person that's managing family finances, that's managing business finances. One of the things that I think was important that Dennis's dad did is that Dennis was in some ways the face of the company. You would go to conferences. Dennis was out at the land improvement contractors, and I think as companies are thinking about that, make sure that there are multiple people out there. Because Dennis, imagine if your dad had been the only one going to these conferences and so on, you would be, for the first time, you wouldn't know half of what you know now.
No, I think that's a great point. I was actually out at a convention about a month ago, and there's another contractor, and he was in his mid-50s. His son is in the field, working the equipment, and he was talking about succession planning. And he did not know what just happened to us. And he's like, I don't know. He's like, I want to bring my son in. I don't know if he's ready. And, I said, well, what happens if something happened to you? He said, would your son know what bank you work with, which insurances you have? And he looked at me, and then I explained, I said, this is what just happened to us. And I was having a lunch with him and his wife, and their faces just dropped. They said, this is reality. I said, if you want your son to be part of the legacy and go to the next generation, these are the conversations you have to have now. Number one, see, maybe he doesn't want to be in your shoes. I said, maybe he doesn't want to take over. Maybe he's just happy being out on the field, because you have that a lot of times. Maybe you have to bring in somebody else to run the company because he wants to be a field supervisor and have that conversation, because everybody assumes, the generation under them wants to sit in the seat. I've had that, and I joke around with it. My goal is I have a 9-year-old daughter, and my goal is, I don't know if she, I'm going to encourage her to do whatever she wants to do. I'm going to run the company so she could be proud of it if she takes it over, or I'm going to run a company that she could want to be with and says, I want to be with a company that has the same core values as my father's company. But you don't know if you have to have those conversations. And that's what I told her. Go back after this conference, have the conversation with your son and say, would you like to take this company over one day? If yes, okay, now I have to start bringing you in to show you, because tomorrow is the one thing I've learned. Tomorrow's not promised. Right. So that, yes, those conversations with my father, bringing me in on meetings, him saying, handing, here's what this is, 20 years ago, I remember, Dad, why do we have this type of insurance? Explaining it. And then I would research it. Dad, why do we have, the banking accounts? Let's start going through everything. And then just kind of, as I took those over, I had a full understanding, but I would have never been able, if I was not in my position, like you said, whether to face in certain conferences, he was the face, out on the sites, we would have never been able to survive, a couple of weeks. If somebody had to come into the office and say, okay, where's payroll?
Right. Right.
Where's the passwords? Where's this go? I could only imagine, and again, I'm working on that now, and making sure if something were to happen to me, everything's in place where the company can succeed. It can continue on because I would not want the 76-year-old business to stop in what my grandfather started because something happened to me and nobody knew where everything else was. And I think that's so important to have everybody have those difficult talk to your kids, and if you're the second generation like me, talk to or third generation like me, talk to say, listen, Dad, listen, what is your plan? Mom, what is your plan? What do you want to do with this business? They might want to sell it. They might not want, and I think that the kids should know that as well. They're not easy conversations, but they need to be had.
George, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just thinking, Dennis is not in the construction business. We're not in the financial services business. We're in the relationship business, right? And you hear that. But a business is only as strong as its relationships. And Dennis, it's so great that your dad had you out there meeting the clients and probably introducing you over the last several years, those quality relationships. And in many ways, we're introducing Kate, to a lot of our relationships. I have other partners that have met, and we make it a point that they're at least in one meeting per year, if not two, with all of our clients. This way, God forbid something happens to any of us, that client has at least met 2 or 3 of the people that work here already, so that they're not going to leave after we leave, so to speak. That's the same thing, not only in buy sell, but also for retirement. we may be, 10, 15 years away from retirement. It's too late to do it when you're a year or two from retirement. You got to do it now. And because everyone asks the question, well, you got some gray hair there, pal. When do you? And I always like talking about our succession plan because I just show a picture of our team and say, well, meet the succession plan,
But that's a great point. And especially in professional services, it's even more important because that relationship. And so this conversation isn't really about death. It's about the future. It's really about thinking the future. And Kate, I wanted to ask you about Robinhood, and Robinhood, I know Robinhood has introduced a lot of people to this concept of investing who haven't thought about investing. How do you feel about Robinhood? And I know a lot of people are playing the game and it's fun and so on. You lose a little money here and there. But what are your thoughts about that as a way to get some young people involved in thinking in a business sense?
Yeah, we're big fans of all of the various different apps that make investing more accessible to younger people, particularly a lot of people in their 20s and 30s don't want to drive to an office, sit down and meet with someone. So we're very aware of that. And we try to tailor our services to the client, no matter what their age is. So for example, for many of my clients, we're doing a lot of things over email, DocuSign, and Zoom, because I know they don't need to have a 90-minute conference call with me or a lunch meeting to get done. A lot of times they're comfortable with that. But I think the apps are a great way for people to get their feet wet, particularly when they're first starting out, and particularly for your separate from retirement accounts. Right. So I think when it comes to your retirement, you're building up your large nest egg for the future. You want to definitely be keyed into your employer's plan, and you may want assistance from a financial planner. But if this is your separate after-tax investing money, by all means, I think the apps are a great way to do it. And they tend to have really low fees. And a lot of them are starting to have particular focuses as well, like impact investing, focusing on companies that have diverse board of directors or are female-owned businesses. So I'm obviously a big fan of all of that.
Well, and for those that don't know, and Robinhood is an app that allows folks to buy partial shares of stocks and so on. And I think it's a great precursor to meeting up with the Reilly group, because when you put some money in, you start to, and so that's all part of the succession where you get young people interested in business, the concept of stocks and investing, and then they grow and say, hey, this business, this entrepreneurial thing is actually pretty interesting. And then you get them in.
And we come from a standpoint of education first. So I love sitting with people, having a full-blown conversation with them, and then encouraging them. I always say, you don't need to do any of this investing through me. I'm happy to have just had this conversation with you and shared my knowledge, particularly when it comes to younger people, and particularly when it comes to women, especially who might feel like they're behind when it comes to investing, just because they might not have older female peers where they are telling them what to do the way some of their male counterparts do at their various companies.
Yeah, kind of a corny analogy, and it's good that Dennis is on because we call it do we hire Dennis or do we go to Home Depot? And there's people in the world like my father-in-law who could easily go to Home Depot and build anything you wanted in his backyard. He was just a master craftsman. However, there's people like me that would call Dennis because I have two left hands when it comes to construction, right? It's the same with investment. I think there's definitely people that are comfortable doing it themselves and they want to do the research and maybe they don't need an advisor. And then there's other folks that say, you know what, I don't do this every day. I'm not comfortable with it. I'll dabble a bit, but with my serious money or my future plans, I want to sit down with someone that does it every day. And we always say, look, that's why they make chocolate and vanilla. If you want to do it yourself, that's fine. But if you're looking for advice and you're looking for someone to help you with it, we can help. And that's been the case. But we do love these apps because it does get people used to investing. Mm-hmm. They're starting to realize though in the last quarter that the investments don't always go up, right?
Right. Yeah, we'll see. And that's the biggest lesson. It's like, well, I saw this on social media. Why is it going down? It's There's no correlation between likes and stock price. So,
I wish there were.
yeah, exactly. Though a lot of young people think that, and so well, we're almost at the end of time, and this has really been an important discussion, and I hope that the audience here and the audience that views it in the future through the recording really takes time to think about this, because this applies to literally everybody. Everybody has to begin to think about what's going on in the future. What are my plans? What kind of documentation do I have put together? What papers have I had signed? But Dennis, I want to thank you for being so open and honest, so soon after the loss, and that means a lot. You're just such a stand-up guy, and the culture of your family is wonderful, and just thank you for that.
I appreciate it. I just want to, two things is, and this is for everybody. Tomorrow is not promised, as we all know. So have the difficult conversations. It's not easy. I've been there. Again, that if there's one thing, have the difficult conversations. Talk about, especially when it comes to succession planning of a business. Have the conversation. Again, and a lot of times it came from me to my father, and I had to bring it up to him. And we had some of the best conversations we've ever had in our life talking about the future. Although you think it might be difficult sometimes, and it is a difficult conversation, but at the end of the day, it's probably the most rewarding one you can have. And that's why we're going to be able to take this, into the third generation of leadership, because of those conversations. So I appreciate, and hopefully this helps.
Well, and I often tell my daughter too to manage up, and so it's good to have a daughter here. That sometimes it's hard. My daughter's not here, so I can't. Sometimes the younger folks have some better ideas than some of us older folks. So it's okay to kind of manage up and ask those questions that are tough, that we need to, because sometimes we don't want to think about that, and so but we have to. And so George and Kate, just again, it's just a blessing to have you on, and just a great model of a dad-daughter team in financial services. But thank you for your time.
Thank you. It's always an honor to be here. And Dennis, it was so nice meeting you and hearing your story. Truly inspirational.
Indeed. And I love the mentor up, because it's very true. And it's not some of the time, most of the time, we learn more from our children, particularly. All three of my daughters have taught me so many lessons. And so that's why, they need to know they have a seat at the table.
Right.
That's what I love about this generation, by the way. I think when we were in our 20s, we just carried that person's briefcase and said, you're the boss.
Right.
But I think, this generation is saying, hey, I want to have a say, and I love it, because we learn every day by it.
Absolutely. And I would thank all of you for listening. Please feel free to share this video. It should be on by next week on our YouTube channel. So take care and have a great weekend, everybody.
Thanks so much. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Dale. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Dennis.
Thank
See
you,
soon.
George. Thank you, Kate. Pleasure, guys. Thank you.
Have a good weekend.
Take care.